Hunt, Showdown, 1896's Update 2.8.0.1, Road to Hell event, changed rendering behavior. These optimized settings maximize frames per second across GPUs without sacrificing visibility. Crytek didn't publish detailed patch notes for the rendering tweaks, but frame time analysis and shader cache comparisons reveal three key changes. First, the SSAO, Screen Space Ambient Occlusion Pass, now runs at a higher sample count by default when set to medium or high. This darkens crevices and adds depth, but it costs 8 to 12% frame rate on mid-range GPUs like the RTX 4060 Ti and RX 7700 EXT. Second, shadow map resolution for dynamic lights, lanterns, flares, muzzle flash, ticked up slightly, which hammers performance in interior compounds where multiple hunters carry light sources. Third, the temporal anti-aliasing algorithm changed its jitter pattern, which reduces shimmer on fence wires. And start with these four toggles. They account for roughly 60% of the performance delta between a struggling 80 frames per second and a smooth 140 plus frames per second on current hardware. Ambient occlusion should be set to low or off. The visual difference between medium and low is barely perceptible in motion, but medium costs 10 to 15 frames per second on GPUs below the RTX 5070 tier. Off reclaims another 3 to 5 frames per second and only removes subtle contact shadows in corners. Competitive players running 240 Hz monitors almost universally disable AO entirely. Lighting quality is the second lever. High enables per-object dynamic shadows for lanterns and flares, which looks impressive but murders frame rate in compounds. Hunt 1896 supports DLSS4, FSR4, and XS2 as of Update 2.8.0.1. If you're on an RTX 50 series card, 5090, 5080, 5070 Ti, 5070, DLSS quality with frame generation enabled is the no-brainer choice. It delivers near-native image clarity while effectively doubling your frame rate. Frame generation adds 8 to 12 milliseconds of latency, but Hunt's relatively slow time to kill, compared to tactical shooters, makes that latency imperceptible in practice. In Video Reflex Low Latency mode, available in the game's settings under Advanced, drops total system latency by another 10 to 15 milliseconds when enabled, which offsets most of the frame gen penalty. IMD users on RX 9000 cards get FSR4. Hunt, Showdown 1896 is heavily CPU bound at high frame rates, particularly on maps with dense AI spawns like Lawson Delta and DeSalle. The game's AI pathing, physics simulation, and audio occlusion calculations run almost entirely on a single primary thread, with a couple of secondary threads handling rendering prep and network sync. If you're targeting 144 plus frames per second, your CPU's per-core performance matters far more than total core count. A Ryzen 7 9800 EX3D with 8 cores will outperform a Ryzen 9 9950EX with 16 cores in Hunt, because the 9800 EX3D's 3D V-cache dramatically reduces memory latency for the game's AI and physics hot paths. To diagnose whether your CPU is... The Road to Hell event introduces 3 performance-relevant mechanics. First, the corrupted Immolator boss variant spawns additional fire particle effects that persist for 8 to 10 seconds after death. These particles use alpha-blended rendering, which is fill rate intensive on the GPU. If you're running a lower-tier card, RTX 4060, RX 7600, you might see brief frames per second drops to 60 to 70 when multiple immolators die in quick succession near you. Lowering effects quality from high to medium pre-culls distant particle emitters and reduces the particle budget, which eliminates those drops. Second, the event-exclusive compounds, Hell's Maw, Brimstone Ridge, feature denser fog volumes than standard map variants. Volumetric fog in Hunt is rendered at half resolution. Here's the tested config that balances competitive visibility with high frame rates across the current GPU stack. For RTX 5070 and above, or RX 9070 EXT and above, at 1440p, texture quality high, object quality medium, shadow quality medium, lighting quality medium, effects quality medium, post-processing medium, anti-aliasing DLSS quality, or FSR4 quality, ambient occlusion low, volumetric lighting medium, SSR screen space reflections off. That configuration keeps you north of 200 frames per second, with DLSS FrameGen enabled on an RTX 5070 Ti, as measured by TechSpot's 245 frames per second average at 1440p medium baseline. For mid-range cards, RTX 4070, RX 7800 EXT, ARC B770 at 1440p, texture quality high, object quality. Build your free playbook for any GPU at betterfps.com/optimize.